Welcome back to Blurred Summits. Today we are here with Saima Jamal. She is an activist within Calgary. She works with a bunch of different organizations for many years, organizing events, protests throughout the city for multiple social causes. Thank you so much for coming on with us today, Saima.
Thanks for having me.
Okay, awesome. So just really quickly, can you tell us a little bit about how you got involved in social activism?
You know, when I was growing up, I thought I'm going to be a pilot as a child. And then a little bit later, I thought I'm going to be a doctor. And I grew up in Bangladesh. And when I finished high school, I had all my plans all made for a very long time, coming to University of Calgary, studying sciences. I did come as an international student. I studied sciences, and then it was in my fourth year, I took one of these GPA booster courses called Development Studies. I was on international development. And when I took that course, I realized that what on earth am I doing dissecting the genetics of fruit flies when there's so much issues around the world, So that's when I changed my whole Bachelor of Science degree to from sciences to social sciences. And after I graduated, I just started working at the University of Calgary, and I worked there for 15 years. There was this one position I was working in as the program manager for the Consortium for Peace Studies at the Faculty of Social Work. And that exposed me to so much conflict and social issues, and basically a lot of peace building issues that we can work towards to reduce those conflicts around the world, just sitting here right in Calgary. So that gave me the academic background, the understanding of the actual issues before I started speaking out on them. So once I was done with the university, that's when around 2014, the 2013, 2014, even starting at 2010, all these conflicts that are happening, I started speaking up a lot on them in social media. And smack at the middle of the Gaza war, if you remember in 2014, that big massacre, the bombing that started, nobody was quiet, especially students, university students, because I was so connected to the university. I had so many university students coming to me because I was working, at the university for so long, a graduate. They would come to me and say, what can we do? Give us something to do. We need to do something, or else we'll go crazy looking at the images that is coming out of social media. So that's where I realized that, for us to be in a healthy way to actually, respond in a healthy way to the conflicts that are happening, one of us have to do something to let people voice their frustration. So that's when I started my full-blown social activism, that, okay, we're going to at least start off with hosting rallies and protests. And somebody has to take a lead that really knows how to gather people, and I knew a lot of activists in the community already that I had connected through the Consortium for Peace Studies. And I knew how to nuance it in such a way that we're going for a peaceful demonstration. We're going for any way possible to stop these wars. So that's what kind of completely catapulted me in front of the activism community in Calgary, is those, standing up for peace, standing up for human rights for Palestinians, and from then on, everything you can think of, whether it is racism issues, Islamophobia, anti-Semitism, BLM, gender issues, wars in Iraq at first, and then Syria, in Afghanistan, everywhere, like we were speaking out, whether it is the Rohingya genocide, or we were talking about the Uyghur issues. And everywhere you need voices in the city that are really fearlessly able to speak out, without worrying about, what is going to happen if I speak out. So you worry about that too. It's not like, you have this license to just say whatever you want without any repercussions. There's always repercussions, but at least if you're going in the right direction, you're speaking the truth of people that have no voice, ultimately you'll get the best results.
Where do you think you find that courage? Because, one of the big things with activism is people are afraid. They're afraid if I speak out on these issues, especially if they're controversial, there's two sides to it, that I'm going to be attacked and this is going to have a negative impact on me personally. So where does a person find the courage to, take that step?
I learned it all the hard way. When I started speaking out in 2014 on the Israel-Palestine issue, oh my goodness, did I get blowback, from the Zionist group, from the Israeli lobby group. And they would write to the university president, they would write to my bosses, they'd do everything to get you, they'll hit your career first thing. They will malign you by calling you an anti-Semite. They will do everything possible to basically take your livelihood away to shut you up. That's their number one tactics. And they use that tactics all over the Western world whenever anybody speaks out on these sort of topics. So you need to make sure that you're not just, when you say that you're fighting against racism, you want to make sure that you're not just making a post about anti-Semitism, but you actually actively work to stop it when you see something, and I'll give you an example. Anti-Semitism, when you fight it, it isn't just about, speaking up that we're not anti-Semitic. When you see something, like, for example, when these anti-maskers were rallying in Princess Island Park, they went around wearing those yellow stars saying, oh, we're the oppressed, we're the Jews of 1945, where we are wearing our yellow stars because we don't want to wear a mask. Can you imagine comparing not having to wear a mask to being a Jewish person during the Holocaust? I mean,
right.
If you don't speak up on that, and our government, the provincial government didn't speak up on that, because it was a lot coming from their own base, because they didn't want this lockdown. So we spoke up when we hosted that Act for Racism rally, Act Against Racism rally that was called on by the Asian community here. We made sure that we called the JCC, the Jewish Council of Calgary, to ask them to come and speak. We made sure that we told everyone that these wearing yellow stars at these anti-masker, anti-lockdown rallies is anti-Semitic, because you can't compare this with that. So there has to be always ways that you genuinely try to build bridges. And that's what we did. I was part of the Jewish Muslim Council of Calgary, forming the first interfaith group. I'm always there, attending events whenever I'm invited to. And I'm always trying to have Jewish voices actually be present in whatever we do, So that's called creating space and actually fighting anti-Semitism by building bridges between Muslims and Jews. So if you don't do that from your heart, if you just show somebody that you're something else and just for the sake of lip service you do something, then you know that your activism isn't real. Because activism it has to be in an intersectional way. It has to be across all. It isn't just for one person. It isn't just for the Black people, or just for the Muslim people, or just for the Jewish people, or just for the Asian people. You have to understand that each of us is oppressed in a certain way. And if you don't give your strength and your support and your solidarity with other oppressed people, then your cause doesn't hold water.
Yeah, it kind of, what you're saying kind of reminds me of a conversation that we had with one of our other guests. An idea that they brought up, in a private conversation one time, was the idea of selective empathy, where it's like sometimes people will only be empathetic or be an activist to one cause. They'll only, pursue one single thing. And he said, that's not what we want to do. You want to have empathy across the board. You want to have activism across the board, right? It's not just certain communities that need voices that speak up for them. It's almost all the communities that need voices spoken up for them, right? So, you've kind of had extensive history with different groups, different social movements, different organizations. What is something that you know now that you wish you kind of knew when you started?
So much, it's one thing is we need to work about educating people. Sometimes we take our activism for granted. Sometimes we think that, my God, this issue is so given. Like, how do you not even understand this? Like, this is a pure issue of oppression. I mean, anybody would get it, but people actually don't get it. And sometimes people that are completely on the other side of the fence is not the people that you need to waste your time arguing with. You talk to the people that are sitting on the fence. So that should be your main audience. I used to spend profuse amount of time, arguing and paying attention to what people on the full across the fence is doing, thinking, and then I realized that, what, my work is very cut out. Number one, I need to make sure that I gather my strength from my own people. So first of all, motivate them. It is without them, without your people, without all the whole community, you're nothing. So you can do that, number one, not just by doing negative campaigning, but also by actually encouraging them, showing them when you do talk about this issue, how you're making a positive effect in the community. People respond so much more to positivity than negativity, So if you are able to, help your community, and not just in activism, I do a lot of humanitarian work. I don't know if you follow me on Facebook, most of my work is just about helping refugees, low-income Calgarians, low-income immigrants. I'm constantly trying to help them out if they're in a really crisis situation, or if they're looking for work, or if they're, having any emotional, social, whatever needs is happening, I'm there to look for them. So this is a good way for people, for you to gather your strength, because in politics, you will see there's a lot of division. But when you're doing humanitarian work, you'll see that people from all different political spectrum is coming to help you out, to help those people out. So this is one tactic that I've learned to make sure that people understand, who you really are, what our causes are, just to help. So people might have completely different views of you on a political situation, but if that political situation creates a refugee to come to your home, you introduce that person to this refugee, and when that refugee tells their story firsthand to this person, or that oppressed person tells the story firsthand to this person, you will see that they'll completely change their mind, because they never saw it that way. They never heard a firsthand account. All they were getting influenced by was mainstream media. So to connect Canadians of just general average, Joe Blow, to oppressed person, and having that one-on-one dialogue with them is really essential. Connecting that regular Joe Blow, the average Canadian, to all the work that you do in the humanitarian side, it's very important, because that gives them an insight on, okay, I can actually make a difference in these people's lives, even if I can't control what's happening back home. And then finally, with all the strength that you've learned, you got to play it very, very smartly. When you talk about what is really happening that is really bad, that you can't really escape, you can't hide the negativity that's happening around the world, but you got to push it with some really strong positive messages. So it is like a very, it's an intense balance. And throughout all of this, you have to do a lot of self-care too, because activism burns you out, just looking at this issue of what's happening around the world, it'll just burn you out, So what do? I use a lot of humor, I laugh things out, I tease, I will troll when I want to, but only in my own page, but the trolling will be all like in a humorous way. So it's like, you use everything. And above all, you need your allies, people that are leaders in the Indigenous movement, leaders in the Black Lives Matter movement, leaders in the anti-racism movement, you need to constantly communicate with them and ask them, hey, I need advice on this, or hey, can you support me on this? How do you think I should do differently this? So, and that's one place you can get and then with that information, you need to learn how to influence the community leaders, the people that are actually in different places of positions of power. You gotta not, some people, some activists, they don't want to have any, relationship or any bridges with, religious leaders or community association leaders or any of that. I make sure that I talk to everybody, from that little girl or boy whose house I'm visiting. I spend time talking to them, to all the community association board of directors, to all the imams, and the priests and the rabbis, to everybody. You got to sit down and talk. The more you talk, the more you dialogue, the less you fight, the more they get to know you, So I cannot express to you how important it is for, that's why I'm a very introverted person. I went to Israel. I went to Palestine. I went there. I spent, 10 days just going from one town to another town to another town, just getting to know the people, the area, the history, the culture, And I tried my level best to go to countries and areas where I work with the people here. So this way I learn more. So if you're not constantly learning, educating yourself, not just by reading books or, learning things from the news or social media, but actually talking to those people from there in here. And if you can, go there and learn more from them. So this education, this thirst for travel, this thirst of learning about them is very important to continue our activism.
Yeah, I especially like that point about, allies. Like, you need to have people who are on your side who you can reach out to and they can be there to support you. But let's say there's a person who's just starting out, right? They're very passionate about a topic, but they don't really know where to find these allies. They don't know, like, how do you establish that connection with someone where you can go to them and you can say, hey, I need help with this idea, and I think that you can be very helpful.
Yes, I have a lot of young people that come up to me and say that, that I want to do this, Saima. How can I go there? How can I do this? And honestly, we live in a world of social media right now. There's so many groups out there that people have created, ask at least one genuine, well-known activist, who to connect with for the rest, for the rest of the movement that you're interested in. Also, you know what? You don't really even need to do that. Make your own mark in this world. You want to go ahead and do something, you don't need a lot, create a Facebook event, make an event, banner, a poster, and just put it as a public post and just post it that, hey, I want people to come because I'm doing this. You will see the first time you might just have a few people show up, your own friends, but somehow people will find out that what other events are happening on the city on this cause, and you'll see the right people will take notice of you. And always send out a press release to the media of whatever you're doing if you really want it to be looked at. Press, not always do they care about how many people are showing up, but if they see that the idea is interesting, that the message is important, they will cover it. So, make friends with the media. I spend a lot of time talking to my reporter friends, I involve them in my volunteer work. I just call them, go for coffee with them, give them stories, give them sources that they can interview for different things. They call me about all kinds of weird things. One of them called me, Saima, tell me, do you know any stories about somebody who has a musical instrument that they're traveling with and they have a story to tell? I'm like, yes, I do. Some people will ask me the most bizarre questions about, where in Calgary are they selling, certified halal meat that people are not really buying into, that they have issues with. So I'm like, yeah, I know that. So all kinds of questions that the media will ask you, and it's always good to, because even though these days we feel like mainstream media is almost, like it's not as important because we all have phones, we all have social media, and we have a lot of people on our, social media. So whatever we post, it's changing people's minds. And we get like firsthand videos on WhatsApp that is constantly coming in and whatever is happening. But even then, so it is good to be friends with the media and talk to them about the stories that you're interested in, why it is important to cover these, So yeah, that's something I would really advise.
How long would you say it took you to establish these relationships? Because I know, for a lot of people, they want it to get done in like a month. I'm a very impatient person. I want the very first thing I do, or the very first action, or the first month, or the first couple of months, I want it to be a success, right? But that's not always the case. Sometimes it takes a couple of years. So how long did it take you to really build up those relationships to where now, you have a large bank of people to support on?
Once you have a really big event that you were successful in hosting, very quickly they come to you. So that's the thing. If you have the right cause, and if you're able to garner people to come to your event for the right cause, you will have everybody coming to you. So I'll tell you, at first, the relationship that I built with the media was a very contentious one. When we were doing the 2014 rallies, the peace rallies for Palestine, the media was covering it in a very harsh way. Israel was bombing the bejesus out of the people of Gaza, while they were portraying it as this conflict, as this real estate dispute, as this, what should I say? Like they would put this as a two-side, like there's both sides of the story. They wouldn't really portray it as what it was, like a mass murder, a full carpet bombing of this tiny little city the size of Kensington, and every time we would have a rally, no matter how well it went, how well attended it was not always portrayed in the best way. It was portrayed in a very negative way. So that's why we realized that, we're not going to be afraid of the media. So we would do very critical articles in our social media the next day of every news article that would come out about our actions. And then the reporters started getting very worried that, holy cow, they're naming us and they're shaming us, we got to do better than what we're doing. So I'd literally get reporters calling me the next day saying, why did you write this about me on social media? I said, when I did my interview with you, I told you this, and you spinned everything that I said and you made it into this ridiculous article. You didn't cover nothing of what I just talked. So when you call them out, you have the power. Don't ever be afraid. As much as I'm telling you to build relationships with media, also never be afraid to call them out. So then people realize that you are genuine. You're not just somebody who's just going to take the shit that whatever they give you. So that's when one reporter might be doing something bad, the other reporters will notice and they will start, building those relationships with you. And same as these community leaders, they always also get attracted to people that are the doers, the action makers, the people that are actually on the ground, doing things. So they will come to you too, and then you create that relationship. It takes time, but you know what? If you talk to one person in that community, that person will connect you to more people in that community. So it is good to always, take some time to build those relationships.
Awesome. One of the big things that's happening right now is tuition increases with the university. So let's say there is a university student, they come to you, they say, Saima, I don't like the tuition increase. They're raising my tuition by 32% for some students, up to 50% for some students in a single year. They come to you, they say, I don't like this, right? I want to speak out. I want to take some action to stop this from happening. What would you tell them? Okay, here's step number 1. This is how you get started.
This is an age-old issue. We used to be hitting all those protests at the University of Calgary during our time when they were raising tuition. This is 20 years ago. Oh my God. It's funny that you bring me back to those old memories. And at that time, we would just follow the lead of the student union. Whatever the student union, whatever protest they would be hosting, we would just show up there, and that was it. But now we have so much more power, we now understand that we need to work with the opposition. With, if the UCP is doing it, talk to the NDP, talk to the NDP, ask for meetings with the MLAs. As students, we can't even think about doing that. Like, what? Why would they meet with us? The student union would meet with us. Okay, you are, but the student union is sending their letters, they're doing it. But you have to understand that the way it works is if how like politicians, they respond to heat and light. Light is the information you give them, the what how it's affecting you, how it's affecting your education, the university, and heat is the amount of calls and letters you send to them. So if you can add to the SU's voice by getting your friends, your individual friends, to show up in their offices, call them, ask for a meeting, ask that, just show up. Their assistants are there in their offices. Even during COVID, a lot of these offices still are staffed. Just go and talk to them and say, you know what, I'm really upset about this. What are you going to do about it? So this is how we can go beyond. And you've got social media. You might be just on Instagram because you're a student, but a lot of the people that are in power, they're on Facebook. So make sure you don't just voice your opinion on Instagram. Be friends with people that are in the corporate world. Be friends with people on Facebook that are the movers and shakers in the community, in the business community, in the nonprofit sector, so that they are also educated that, wow, is this what's going on with the students? Because I don't have any students coming and talking to me. I don't have any of my activist friends being talked by any students that this is what we're facing. So there is this whole gap between Instagram and Facebook where we're not connecting, So if we can connect better, the young people with the millennials, then that'll be a little bit better, with the Gen X's and all of that. We just need to have a little bit more communication. So that's one thing, speak about it on social media, speak to your, politicians directly. There's so many ways to demonstrate. You just as a person yourself can show up in the education minister's office, and whoever is responsible for the university, you could see people were doing chalk drawings. People are doing, throwing leaflets. They're doing graveyards in front of them, everything you can do. But then at the end, your biggest power is changing the government. If you have a government that is hostile towards you, university education, towards everything, which this current government is, you know what? The only answer is to make sure that public services are taken care of is by changing it to a government that actually cares about public services. So there you go.
Awesome. What is, let's say a person's getting started with social activism. It's not easy, right? It's not easy to go to your MLA and to ask for a meeting. You'll be rejected. You'll be pushed to the side. It's not easy to do these things. What are some challenges that somebody who's starting off in social activism, you should tell them, this is something that you will face, so that when they do face it, they know, okay, I'm not alone. Like, this is something that's common. This is something that I should embrace rather than try to, stop it.
Of course, even look at me. You would think that people know me so well, they would take a meeting with me or return a phone call or an email. I have so many politicians, they don't even bother returning an email, let alone have somebody, talk to me on the phone or, have a meeting with me. So this is part of life. Never ever get discouraged by what a politician thinks when you call them, but don't stop at there. If he doesn't take your call, get all your 3 other friends to call him, get your 3 other friends to write to them, because this issue is important to you. This issue is important for your peers, so you got to do everything you can to bring pressure to them. And then if you can get a meeting through yourself, talk to the people who represent this issue. Ask them, sometimes they also need a nudge that, hey, talk to your SU president, talk to your, tell them that we elected you in power to do a work. You're not doing the work. So can you please go and talk to them? And if you write to them, then it gives them pressure to work harder for you. So there's always that thing that, don't lose hope that one person didn't return your call or didn't want to see you. There's many other avenues to pursue this.
Awesome. Can you name like a success where your social activism, or maybe you and some of your peers and the groups that you work with, you guys had a real meaningful impact, and this was a moment you felt really proud that you guys did
There's
this?
so many, honest to God, there's so many that where we had such a good impact. And let me just talk about the most latest one. And I've been mentioning this for quite some time, but I will continue with this. You know, when the bombing in Gaza happened in 2014 versus what is happening now, this is the last 11 days, the last 3 weeks, what just happened. In 2014, they kept on bombing Gaza for 6 weeks, you know, straight 6, 7 weeks they went on, and they didn't stop. Netanyahu didn't stop. But now, after 11 days, they just stopped. Why do you think that happened? You know, I firmly believe it is because people spoke out. Their activism was off the roof. You know, people were all over the world. You know, they were heeding the call of that, you know, those two brothers and sisters, that Muhammad al-Kurd and Mona al-Kurd. I don't know if you know those two siblings in Sheikh Jarrah, that these two Palestinian siblings that have been the voice of that neighborhood, you know, asking people that, hey, don't let us be expelled. Don't let us get evicted. You know, we have the right to live in this neighborhood. So people spoke up everywhere. And one thing that this country of Israel hates the most is its image, you know, and its image war all happens on social media. So if you can win this war simply on social media by speaking up and getting everyone around you to speak up, then you can save lives. You know, you can stop more little babies from getting killed, more innocent men, women, doctors, journalists, you know, and above all, children from getting killed. So if you can do something like that by just speaking up, sometimes you might think that your voice has no power. It does, because another person will get educated. Another person will have the courage to speak up on that. So I think we won this war just by us speaking up on all over and all platforms. The mainstream didn't speak up. The government didn't speak up. Our Canadian government, the US government, nobody was denouncing. But then the Israel government scared shit about its image, and its image was completely massacred on social media. So that's how we speak up. That's how we have the power to win something. And for us, the simple win was to stop this within 11 days.
Yeah. You know, something that I've personally noticed within Calgary, the city specifically, is, you know, back in 2014, they had protests, but they were nothing compared to the protests this year. Even with things like the Black Lives Matter movement. This year, the protest was massive compared to years past when they've had those protests. What is happening now? There seems to have been a shift, right? But I can't put my finger on it. What was the shift? What's happening? Why are more people showing up today than they have in previous years?
It is, you make a very astute observation, because you won't believe, in 2017, it was myself who hosted the first Black Lives Matter rally during those Ferguson riots, if you remember. Yeah. And then we see what's going on now. And the same with the Asian community too. Asian people, Chinese people, they never come out to any rallies. You know, they never ever speak out. But after this Corona and this COVID thing, you won't believe, I had like old Chinese women coming out and telling their community leaders, we need to hit the streets. We need to speak up to what's happening to our people on the streets when people were showing so much hate towards them. There is this massive shift that is happening in people's awakening. People aren't controlled anymore by the mainstream media. Everybody has Instagram and Twitter and social media. Everybody no longer gets the whole blindly just following their government or whatever the government is doing. People have the power now. They feel so much more empowered because the country as a whole, I think the world as a whole, is kind of shifting to the left. That's why you see issues that are more predominantly, that is spoken up in the movement around the people that are in the political left. That those are getting a lot more attention, you know, all over the world. That is happening. And I think activism and activist groups everywhere, they're connecting with each other. they're through Zoom, through social media, and I think that this whole pandemic, you might think that it'll scare us to stay home. It'll scare us to not go out and hit the streets. But when we feel like we are in such a, what should I say, in such a point in our life that if we don't speak up, we know that and we know that it'll get worse. But what's even better is when we are speaking up, things are changing. Things really are changing, because I'll tell you something. Look at this curriculum, the Alberta curriculum, the school. We just saw 2 days ago, the teachers voted 99% non-confidence vote to the education minister. Now, you might think that, okay, this government is not changing anything, even after so many people spoke up. But you know that there's going to be a big change coming during elections. So this is the power we have now. We have the power now. We know how to organize ourselves. Housewives, teachers, people who have never done any social activism, they all are now completely plugged in. People are really caring about the issues that before they never cared about. So whichever political spectrum you're in, you see people are now so much more involved. So I think there really is a huge shift in people's minds that, they're more powered up by social media. They're more powered up by talking to a whole bunch of and connecting with people in a very easier way. Technology made the world so much smaller that you have the power to know what is happening, where it's happening, and make a change. I would say these are some of the things. And another one thing I really wanted to say, Canada went through a huge shift when they accepted Syrian refugees. When they had that big opening of doors to all the refugees that came in. So with them, a lot of other refugees came in too, from all over. So we live in a very multicultural world where you and I, who have been here forever, have the power to just talk to people from those places very quickly. So that also changes, because firsthand information, listening to people, is very important in changing your mind.
Awesome. Yeah, like it seems like social media has, what it's done is, no longer are people allowed to turn a blind eye. With traditional media, there are a few people that get to select what stories get big and what stories people should care about and where the social eye is turned. But with social media, you don't get the choice, right? Everyone is informed about everything, right? And I suppose that increases the level of social activism, right? But what are some resources? Like, do you know of any particular resources that people can access, they can go to, that they can tap into that will help them to, put on these events and be social activists?
When I see the groups that are very active and that are putting events together, I see them organizing a lot on WhatsApp too. Okay. So they find the connections of people that have similar interests and wants to make a really strong impact. So they put like 10 people in a WhatsApp group. So that seemed to be very much working as well. And people create these groups, even as I said, Alberta curriculum, okay, or Idle No More, or any of these, big groups that get connected. When you come together as a group, you leave all your other differences behind and focus on that issue to connect with your peers. That has a really good influence. Then those people in that group will connect you to books, to other resources, to other organizations that are taking the lead. So it's all about connecting first, and even demonstrations. When we first did the Humanity Washed Ashore in 2015, which was when Alan Kurdi, he had washed ashore. If you remember that little boy with the blue pants and the red shirt, we did a big demonstration in City Hall. Right there, we met all the people that joined us later in our volunteer work, in writing to our MLAs, in showing up and speaking up in the media to change the government so more refugees can come in. So these are places where you gather your forces, and these are places where you need to go out. Sometimes people, of course, we're going through a pandemic, but then there are some issues that are even bigger than the pandemic, that you can't sit anymore at home because people are dying 10 times faster than the pandemic. So that's when, if you show up there, you connect with people, you're creating your base, you're creating your strength, you're creating your connection. So you will see then when you start talking to them, they'll right away say, hey, do you know that this guy's been doing this for a long time? You should talk to this person too. So then you spend time talking to that person, getting educated, learning how he did it, learning from his successes and his failures. So that's just, it's all about connecting.
Awesome. What are, a couple, maybe 1, 2, 3 unexpected life lessons? Some things that you got out of social activism that you didn't expect to learn.
Oh, so much. You might sometimes have your closest people come and discourage you. It might be your family members, it might be your friends, and then you might see that something that you thought was so given, people will understand. One of your closest acquaintances, your coworker, completely disagrees with you on that, and then you got to choose, how important is this issue to you, that do you still want to be friends with them, or do you want to just say, that's it, this is where I draw the line, I don't need to be surrounding myself with people that don't believe in this, so these are things that comes up very unexpectedly, because a lot of times we believe that our causes are so important and they are so true that we forget that people in our lives might see them completely differently. So for example, the Black Lives Matter. I have had so many friends tell me that I just discovered my uncle is such a racist. My mom or dad is such a racist, my brother or sister, my best friend, my colleague, that they would say such racist comments right in front of me that I couldn't believe that they weren't getting this, And so then they would say that, do I want to be around them? Should I call them out on them? Should I educate them? So these are things, be prepared that there might be people very close to you in your life that will oppose you on this. Be prepared that your activism will affect your career, but always be true that, what you're saying is something that won't hurt somebody that is less fortunate. It is just, helping the oppressed people. Number 3, never let your actual career be a second thing, your family be a second thing to your activism. Because I know we get very passionate about our activism work to a point we forget about, going out and spending time with our family, or, working or doing something during work hours. So make sure you look after your life, you look after your family, you look after your work, you work hard, and then you do your activism, And sometimes it's very hard for me too, but it is more for me to say, to remind myself that those things come first.
Awesome. Where are you, what are your goals for the next year with your social activism? Where do you want to take it in this next year?
Honest to God, I thought that I was going to retire. and I was really planning to even move or do anything again till this whole thing happened. I felt like, I've done I've paid my dues, I've done whatever I could. And then things happen and it sucks you back in. And you're like, if you don't take the lead again, you don't know what's going to happen. You got to keep on moving. So the world is a very imperfect place. So there's no shortages of things that are coming up. So for me, moving forward, in my work, I focus really hard with getting refugees hired, skilled refugees. But I'm really looking forward to traveling again. I want to again go to the places that the people that I've really worked hard with. I want to really go to Syria. I want to see, all the places where the refugees here are from. I want to understand, their culture, their life, their stories much more. So before I can even go forward and do more things about those people, I need to visit them. I need to talk to them. So I'll give you an example. When I was doing a lot of work with the Rohingya population, I actually went to the camps. I went all the way to Bangladesh right after their exodus. They came out on August 25th. I was there on September 15th. I went to all those camps in Bangladesh where they were, and I spent 10 days just wake up in the morning and I'd go to the camps and I'd come back at late night. And that was my life. If I hadn't done that, I wouldn't be able to really talk to people of what I saw and what is really going on over there. So if you really get the chance, don't be afraid to travel. Everybody will discourage you. Like, oh, it's not safe. Oh, it's not this and it's not that. But I've never had that much care being given to me when I travel alone as a woman. All of a sudden, everybody wants to take care of you. So those are things that I still want to continue.
Wow, that's amazing. So what was your experience like in those camps? Just, out of curiosity.
Well, I went there when they were just arrived in the camps. So I don't think I've ever seen anything as, I don't even know how to get back to you to describe what I saw. But honestly, thank God I had my mom with me. And, I worked with a lot of refugee population. But to go and see these people, when they talk, I actually understand a lot of their words because I grew up in Bangladesh and they speak an accent that I'm very familiar with. I don't understand all their words, but I do understand a lot of their words. So when you have these little kids, they just come and they give you a big salam, assalamu alaikum, they'll say it in these are very religious people. They're very religious Muslims, so they'll come. They have nothing there, but they will come and they'll greet you. They'll smile at you. You walk into their little shanty shacks and you see that there's a little bit of potatoes, one oil, one rice, and you sit down with them. They love that you're here, but then they have this thirst to tell you their story, what happened to them. And it's that moment when they open their mouth and they tell you about their harrowing experience. That's when you just sit down and you sit down dumbfounded that what did I just hear? From grandmothers to mothers to, everybody, they will keep on telling you. They have this thirst that somebody is here to finally listen to what I went through, So it's like, it really, really leaves you with a lot of trauma too. It takes you a while to get over that. But it also makes you understand that, what? Even at this time, day and age, there are people that'll just kill you for your religion, just because you come from a different religion than you are, and that is very real. And they would do it to the most poorest of poor people. These aren't wealthy people. These Rohingyas were like the poorest of poor refugees. They had a home, they had a pond, they would have a cow, but they weren't well off. They would just live in little villages. So if people can do that to you, when you already have no protection, it just gives you a completely different perspective of this world, what human beings are capable of, but also how much resilient these refugees are after they come out. They're trying to rebuild with nothing. So, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's definitely, I think it's, what you were doing, where it's kind of listening to these stories and telling the stories of these people. That's very important, right? Because if nobody hears the story or the firsthand account of truly what was happening, then, we can't, where's the change going to come from, right? If we don't even know what's happening, how can we possibly say we're going to change the situation? So I think that's very, very powerful.
100%, 100%, yes.
Yeah. So, just to end things off, we always ask our guests, or we give them this little scenario. So let's, imagine you're going on a hike to the top of a mountain. there are some things you can bring on this hike that we all know is going to help you, right? You bring some good hiking boots, it helps you. You bring a couple hiking sticks, some snacks. These things, they help you get to the top of the mountain, right? So let's imagine that this mountain is your life, right? And the peak, that's the peak of, let's say, your social activism, of your achievements, of your life accomplishments. What are some characteristics you would suggest for people to bring with them on this hike so that it will help them reach that summit?
Humility, number one. Don't get too high on yourself that just because you've achieved all of this, you become too proud. Never, ever have pride in yourself in that way. Always be humble. Always know that what you're doing to lead the cause is just as important as that person that is putting a like on your status, or that person that's sharing an article that's for that cause. Every little bit helps in moving it forward. Number two, courage. There'll be so many things and so many people to scare you about speaking up. Don't. You have to have courage in your heart. Number three, you have to be educated on the issue. If you don't have education, if you don't really know what's really you're talking about, don't talk about it as much. Or at least follow what others are saying. Number three, you have to be genuine. Don't do it just because it's popular. Do it because it needs to be done. Speak out when everybody's silent. Because this is something that is a genuine, a real, a truthful cause that's going to help people. Number four, always center the voices of people that are getting affected. Don't center your own thinking of the situation. Don't center an important person or a person who asked you to do this, their voice. Center the voice of the oppressed who you're trying to help. So these things, if you do it, you'll be on the right path.
Awesome. Well, that's amazing. I think you gave us a lot of, inspiration and guidance to hopefully find the issues and, be observant and recognize the issues within our own community and the international community. And, hopefully giving us some of that inspiration to actually take steps towards that change and maybe making the world a little bit better through our actions. So thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate it.
Most welcome, Abdul, and thanks for having me again.
Thank you guys so much for tuning into this episode of Blurred Summits. If you thought that the information here was useful, think of one person who could benefit from this information and be sure to share it with them. You can catch the full video podcast on YouTube. The full audio podcast is out on all platforms, and be sure to follow us on Instagram for more content. Thank you.